life is made up of simple shapes and lines. When you think of like a triangle or a square, you're gonna start seeing them everywhere as we learn how to draw. It begins with observation. And the closer or more carefully that you start to observe things around you, the more straightforward and really easy that drawing is going to be. When you start thinking, oh, that is a rectangle, or there's a square right there. When you start recognizing these shapes and how different items or things around us are built out of really simple shapes and lines, drawings become really easy. And when I think about drawing, it really starts big and simple. And so let's look at the most general and simple shapes first. And then when we get those locked in the right places, in the right proportion, then we can start looking closer into some of the smaller and more complex details. But we're gonna start big and simple and look at those shapes first. First, you have a triangle. A triangle is literally as simple as it sounds. And then you have a circle, and you have a square. All of these shapes are what you learned a long time ago in school, and it almost sounds like stupidly simple, but this is where we start. We start with the most simple shapes. We're gonna start recognizing them in things all around us, and then we'll get into the details a little bit closer. Now, a couple other kind of variations of these shapes. With a square, you might elongate it and call it a rectangle. Or with a circle, you might, again, stretch it out and you have what people might call an ellipse, but it's really just an oval. So you have an oval, a triangle, circle, square, rectangle. We're gonna use these simple shapes to create a simple version of really anything we see around us. Right now, we're really looking at flat, two-dimensional shapes and images. But when we start looking at 3D, 3 dimensions, then we'll talk about a cube or a sphere, but really we're looking at the most basic shapes now, and then we'll build upon that. We start seeing everything around us in a different way, and the rest of it will make a lot more sense when we just start to see these simple shapes in everything around us. So let's do a few examples and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. This is very simple, but it's gonna help us understand the idea. So you have a pie right here. We're looking for the most basic, simple shapes first, and then we'll go into any more detail. So the first shape that I see is a circle. You have the plate in the back, but you also just have the pie, which we kind of understand from a regular life is a full circle. So I'm gonna start there. Now I'm looking for the next most basic shape. We have a circle, and when I look at this cutout, that's a big part of what I'm trying to create here, and I can see it's straight lines. It really looks like there's a square here. So I can go ahead and use a square to kind of fill in this cutout. So I have those angles cutting out of the pie, and when I look right here, this is essentially a triangle. It has the curve of the circle, but even if I just cut this angle in half, then I have my triangle right here. And if I was gonna draw that on my own, I know I'm gonna start with a circle. I'm gonna use a square to cut out, and I'm gonna put a triangle in there for this extra piece. Now I have that pie with a piece cut out. I can go into any more detail now that I have those basic shapes done, but this is the idea. Now let's do this again with another simple food. I think that gives us some really simple shapes to work with. I'm looking for the most basic shapes first, and there's a few circles here. I'm gonna start with this circle right here with the pit. There's a circle in the middle, and then as I kind of expand out here, I can see pretty much the shape of a circle around it, and it has that hump on the top. So what if I just start with a circle, and then I can add this part on the top. So when I draw this on my own, I can start with a circle here, then I can add a circle on top, and I see my bump, Now I have an avocado if I decide to erase this line. So you start with the simple shapes first, go into any more detail. You can add some detailed lines for the pit, or maybe even a little bit of the outside coming around. But we start with the basic shapes first. So here we're gonna get into a little bit more of a complex image, but it's still the same basic shapes we're gonna be using. So let's look at what are the most basic shapes that we can see. Well, if I kind of turn it this way, you can see it a little bit more straight on, and I see a rectangle more than anything. A rectangle that goes the length of the skateboard. And you can see kind of where it cuts off with the trucks. You can put a rectangle right here. And with the end of the skateboard, it's really a circle. I mean, we're only using half of it, but there's a circle right here. And there's a circle down here. So here we have some circles, and with the wheels, those, as we're looking at them, are really just small rectangles. And with the trucks, you have a rectangle at the base and a smaller rectangle connecting the wheels. That's essentially the shapes of the skateboard. And if I'm gonna draw it on my own, start with a rectangle. I know I wanna cut off towards the end. So I have a couple rectangles here. I'm gonna throw in my circles. Now I have rectangles for the wheels, the trucks. And I'm looking at kind of the placement of those shapes. And now I just erase what I don't need. And so we refine it a little bit. I'm going to connect those a little better. And you can put in a little more detail. You can work it out as much as you want. You can put in the graphics on the bottom side of the skateboard. But you can see how those basic shapes gave me what I was looking for, what I was trying to draw. I'm using the most basic shapes that I can, and then going into any more detail afterwards. Now in this image, there's a lot more shapes happening, but they're also still basic shapes. So when I look at this, what do I first see? The biggest, most simple shape that I can is a huge rectangle. So I have this rectangle. Well, then if I keep breaking it down, I have another rectangle here for the roof. And here in the middle, there's a big triangle. Here in front of the door, there's a rectangle, a triangle over the top. And then with the door, it's just a rectangle underneath. The windows are just rectangles. And this window is a rectangle or a square with half of a circle on top. Again, you can go into a lot more detail. When you get to this point, you can put the windows in the inside, you can put the windows on the door, you can put a door handle, you can put all kinds of details here, but you know where they fit because you have the basic shapes. And if you wanted to draw this separate from the picture, now I'm gonna start with a rectangle, I'm gonna split it at the top, put a couple triangles in there, and if you can draw rectangles and triangles, you can draw a house. You can draw all of these things that we've already done. I want to do one more and do a little bit more of an organic shape. So when you look at this rabbit, you might think, what am I supposed to do with that? How do I even start? Well, let's look for the most basic shapes we can, and we'll start from there. So there's a lot of curves, so I'll probably use a number of circles here, and then we'll just connect them in a couple different ways. So let's start with his head, and I'm gonna find a circle there, and I'm gonna start there. So now how am I gonna finish his head? I'm gonna add a little bit there for his nose. Add a couple ovals here for his ears. Now this one's behind the other ear, so it gets cut off, but you can see how that shape would just fill in. And with a pencil, I'd probably just draw it and then erase that line. Now with his body, I'm gonna start with, I see a lot of curve here and even on the back, so I might just start with a circle. It would connect around here, and then I'm gonna add this bump in the back. And with his feet, they're kind of little triangles. And now you can go into more detail. Now I see his eye. It's mostly a circle, has a little angle in the back. He has his nose. And I erase the lines I don't need, and I have a rabbit just with the most simple shapes, circles, ovals, a couple triangles, and I can fill in all the rest, add some hair, connect the lines, add the grass in there. But I have my subject because of the shapes that I was using. So what I hope this is starting to do is getting you to see things a little bit differently. That when you look at items around you in your home, or you're outside and you see things around you, you start noticing there's a triangle right there, or that's made up of a bunch of little circles, or if I put a square next to a triangle and over a rectangle, there you go. And so you start seeing things differently, seeing them in shapes, breaking them down so that it becomes really simple, because anyone can draw a triangle, anyone can draw a circle, anyone can draw a square. So when you see those shapes in the things that you're looking at, now all of a sudden you can draw these complex images that you never thought you could, because all you're really doing is drawing triangles and squares. So we start breaking it down into the big, simple shapes. And then we'll take some steps to learn how do we get into some of the smaller detail as we go. So here's what I want you to do. Now think, what are some different items, maybe pictures of things that I can look up or I can grab and bring next to me, and I can practice this. Where we're at right now is not necessarily about I can do it all just in my head, not looking at any reference. Go find something you can practice with. Look at it, break it into its simple shapes, see how far away from each other they are or the size difference, or maybe grab a picture and print it off. Draw the shapes on top so you can really practice seeing shapes and not even worry about the accuracy. You're just looking at the shapes, and that's where it begins. So go find something to practice with, grab your pencil, and let's start drawing.